Hi everyone, today we're honored to invite Dr. Alan Green to share his medical practices and knowledge with us. Dr. Green is a renowned pathologist in New York. He has translated large amounts of scientific research on anti-aging and life extension and put it to work on humans. To our knowledge, he's a true pioneer in the clinical use of rapamycin to fight against aging himself and in the practices for more than 1,000 patients. Thank you so much for joining us today. So it's so good to see you. Now, if you don't mind, now shall we start this interview? Well, my first question is our readers are wondering that when you first started to take rapamycin for apical hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, you are not so sure that it will work, right? So, as a doctor, why did you choose rapamycin instead of other medical treatment?
My cardiovascular system was deteriorating very, very rapidly. And so I was in but I thought I was suffering from aging. At the time, I hadn't sort of like, I had it like I wasn't in clinical practice. I didn't know what sort of, I was getting very, quite short of breath with like a small degree of walking or any degree of walking up hills. I thought my sort of like medical, I thought my con- uh, cardiovascular system was deteriorating very, very rapidly. And so I was in but I thought I was suffering from aging. At the time, I hadn't sort of like, I had it like I wasn't in clinical practice. I didn't know what sort of like what aging, I didn't really know what aging looked like since I was in my early 70s. And I'm all I knew, I was in my early 70s and I was going downhill very rapidly. That was really all I knew. I just assumed that, oh, I must be suffering from aging.
But
Then,
that's the first time that you're realizing what is
yeah,
the feeling of being.
we're right. So before that, I never thought about aging whatsoever. I sort of like that was, so I had never thought about aging. Aging isn't anything that's considered as a medical thing. And so I hadn't thought about aging. And now when I sort of like see that, well, you're going, then I see, oh, I'm going downhill, which proved sooner than I had expected. This is very surprising how fast I'm going, like declining, how rapidly I'm declining. So I say, well, this must be due to aging. Let me sort of like figure out what I could do about like aging. Then I sort of like came across the only sort of, so then I began studying like aging. The only thing available that I discovered that made any sense was the idea of like Black's idea about rapamycin. So I decided, well, maybe I would try that. At the time, I had very little expectations that it was going to work actually. I sort of like, so I had very little expectations that it was work. I was very but I just decided, well, that was the only sort of like thing that was available for treating aging. And I just decided, let me see if it worked. I had little expectation that it was going to work. It was only after sort of, and then I just sort of like, from like the work that was available, I like figured out that like a good dose should be 6 milligrams once a week, just by sort of like some of this, a lot of the stuff that was out there. So then I decided to sort of like try that. Then by around like 3 or 4 months, I was just blown away by how well it was working. I just cannot believe how incredibly great that I was doing, that I was just doing remarkably well. And I noticed it's sort of like not only did I have a lot much improvement of cardiovascular function, I had all sorts of other things I was doing very well. I was extraordinarily happy with how I was doing. It wasn't until about 3 years later that I had an opportunity to have an echocardiogram. When I had an echocardiogram 3 years later, I found out, oh, you weren't suffering from aging, you were suffering from this other cardiomyopathy. And then I realized, oh yeah, that's what killed my mother, that's what killed my grandmother. That's why I wasn't having a lot of like old people on my mother's side of the family. I just realized in retrospect, oh yeah, that's what you had. But it just sort of So it just turned out that rapamycin worked very, very good for that because that's sort of like it's the genetic disorder, but it has a final common pathway involving fibrosis and hypertrophy, and rapamycin kind of blocks that. So rapamycin had a very good clinical effect, although it did sort of like create the anatomic changes that have been present. I should have started it 30 years sooner.